Howdys and salutations, y'all. Sorry about the slight late start. We're only about 5 minutes late. Um, been doing some more fitness stuff, and unfortunately, it ran just a hair long. But we are back, and we are actually done with composition this time. I promise. Even if we find stuff to improve, I ain't touching it. Like, we can do smaller tweaks once we have everything, like, in here. Like, if we need to adjust Nile or something, like, whatever. But, like, general composition, nah, this is it. Now, I'll openly admit I'm a little tired today. Partly because I got to sleep too late. But partly because of the aforementioned fitness stuff. I'm just straight up winded, so I apologize if I'm not quite fully upbeat today, and if we wrap a little short. Although when I say we'll wrap short, half the time we don't. So we'll see how this ends up going. Let's see. Okay, main thing I wanted to work on today. Oh, I should crack open the, I'll give you all a little behind the scenes. We got our blank thumbnail template. This one turned out kind of interesting. Like, it's not actually the best quality drawing, but at thumbnail size, I thought this one looked pretty cool. And I think overall the flame effect on the Shotel looks pretty sharp. Literally. Only downside is it puts it, like, pretty parallel with the camera, which we don't necessarily want. Although, actually, I'll have to think about ways to show that it is at a slight angle. Maybe dealing with the hilt or something. Because the real thing is like a full-on circle. That is not a circle. You know what I mean. None of that's even close. And the lack of warm-up really shows today, doesn't it? Oh, yikes. But I thought this was a cool one. And it's just one element that we actually knocked out pretty quickly yesterday after all of the fumbling around with composition. So I don't know if we'll be able to keep that trend up, but hopefully we'll be able to make good time on the rest of this. The main thing I'm prepped to do today, like we may look at other stuff, but the main thing I want to look at is the hand in the foreground. Because figuring out Miquella face is going to be a big challenge. I want to face that on a fresh week. Same deal with hair is going to be interesting. We know we struggled with that with Malenia, and we'll have to figure out a good style that works for Miquella and get those braids figured out and how they're going to land. And then, of course, the tunic type. I'm not too worried about the arms. Like they can be a challenge, but if you take your time and like on them, then they're not actually that horrible. True of hands too, by the way. But figuring out the fabric folds, while very fun, I want to make sure that we give plenty of time to plot those out. Because if we just wanted to have a static pose with the fabric, hanging down, fine, whatever, not that hard. I mean, once you figure out a little bit of fabric physics stuff, and there's good guides on that. But I want this to look like Miquella has just walked up here. Or at least to show that Miquella has just turned. I want to capture the motion, and we need to make sure that the folds show that correctly, which means we're going to need to do a little more prep and research. So we're going to save that one for future. And we're going to work on the hand and just see how far we get. I'll be honest, if we finish the hand early, I'm probably doing Nile next, because Nile's going to be interesting. And there's a little more composition with Nile, just in terms of size. Just in terms of how big do we make Nile. To not distract, and to blend into the background. I mean, in this one, Moog is pretty big, and is still almost entirely background. So there's ways to do it with lighting and color and value that will work well. Okay. Now the other thing is that I am drawing with my right hand, which means that I cannot currently use my right hand as a very good reference for this. Unfortunate. Until you remember that we can flip the canvas. Assuming that I hit any of the right buttons. And I just figured out when my circles were bad. I forgot to reset my pen. So they were twice as wide as they ought to be. Hey look, that's a much better circle. Perfect circle? No, not remotely. But a lot less garbo. Hey look, a semicircle. Who'da thunk? Anyway. Still a lack of prep on my part to not catch that faster, but you know, what you gonna do? Was this quick shade? Oh yeah, just basic composition check. Cool, we good. New layer for this. Just getting our roughs in here. Rough. And as usual, I probably get too detailed in our roughs, and the main thing that I'm going to want to fix with the final inking this time, rather than level of detail, because last time the thing we were fixing with the final ink was level of detail, and we may do that with the hand or Nile or some such, but for the most part, we seem to be just going for it with this. So instead, I'm going to focus the inking phase on specifically line quality, which is something we did very badly last time and something I have very little experience with, so it'll be a little bonus learning. More to learn. Always more to learn, but that's good. In any case, how do I actually do the whole canvas flip? Oops, pardon. I'm sure there's a button to do it for the whole canvas. I'd expect it to be down here. I just never seem to find it. So we'll just do this. Oh, that's lag. Interesting. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That ain't good. Oh, that is not a flipped canvas. And it's defaulted us to this icon. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm just going to let it think for a while. Oh! Oh, I haven't streamed since the other thing that reminded me of. Yes? Uh-oh. I don't... Why is the aspect ratio of my menus weird? I didn't even know it could enter full screen quite like that. Oh! That doesn't appear to have done anything, which scares me. Actually, quite a bit. Let's try just flipping one layer. Oh, because I got all those singing iterations, which have a bunch of nonsense on them. Oh wait, no, we just need to flip POV anyway. Makes sense if there was an option here, but I guess it is just through the edit menu. Cool. Easy. Oh, I guess you can also just do it with that tool? Oh boy, this is gonna mess things up. We're just gonna hide everything else. Sure, we'll leave that. That won't be confusing. Okay. Let's see, the other thing is I need to make sure I've actually got something to grip with my left hand that's going to simulate this properly. That'll do. And it'll be interesting, too. Okay. I know I'd done it like that, but if you're actually gripping the edge of something, it's going to be more like this. Which will be, on the one hand, less detail, but on the other hand, more detail in some other parts. So it should be interesting. Still pencil, size 4, size 5. Okay, but now back to the thing that black screen reminded me of. So, I finally attained the latest Pokemon game. Took my time on it. Didn't seem like it was that big of a priority, especially given the reviews. So, I decided to wait until more info came out, see if any patches happened, and more importantly, see if a bunch of people sold it on eBay for cheap, because they didn't like it. And the answer is yes, some people did that. So I have it now. Quite happy with that, actually. And yeah, I mean, about matches reviews, but it's one of those I got to give credit where it's due. Is it buggy as all get out? Yes, especially with the camera. In fact, almost entirely with the camera. At least in single player, the camera is the problem. I think the problem is that it's too far above and behind the protagonist, and so it leads to being kind of like slightly too distant from things. And maybe it's better on a full screen. I'm on a Switch Lite, so that may be a contributing factor, but it does make stuff small. But it also means the camera's far enough back that it clips through stuff constantly and runs into things. Um, and if you're like back towards an object, it has to get way closer to the character all of a sudden. And the further away you are, the more jarring that is. But yeah, no, I made it a whole 2 minutes into the game before I managed to clip the camera straight through a wall without meaning to, and thinking I'd accidentally frozen it. It turns out, if you happened to rotate your camera to the left, not anything crazy, not like weird angles or finicky, just like to the left, and then you walk down the stairs from the starter room, and then you interact with the houseplant, your screen goes black because the camera clips through the wall. And then the character freaks out when the character's finally back in view. And all in all, it's just kind of embarrassing. Like, I don't know. There used to be people used to talk about Nintendo polish, and that doesn't seem to be a thing with Pokemon anymore, which is a shame. I don't know what I'm trying to perfect on that, but I'll take it. We'll adjust the wrist as needed, but I'm going to focus on this for now. And I suppose I need to actually think about proportions and such with this rather than just relying on the underline. You know what I ought to do? Undo all this, undo those weird transforms. We can undo the circle erase, though. We don't need the circle erase. Okay. This is our POV one. All that's really critical from this is the edge of the table, which is about here. There we go. The old trick of look where you want the line to go and it'll go there. Look somewhere else and the line will go wherever the heck it stinking pleases. It's weird because it doesn't feel like you're doing anything different, but it does tangibly improve your lines. Anyway, there's that, and then there's rough hand position and size. Cool. I did that on the wrong, all of that on the wrong layer. Cool. I use my own advice. Yep, there we go. Well, I got the first part wrong. There we go. Took a couple tries, but got it. I just need to clean it up. The old one, I mean. I'm going to temporarily lock this layer because we don't need to be making any edits to it. There we go. It's interesting. I think the issue is that it only counts as double tap if my pen is vertical. And that's why, yeah, okay. That's why I've been having issues with that. It's not that the sensitivity or the number of taps is wrong. It's that tilt actually matters now. Who'da thunk? There we go. Wait, that was roughly where the hand was. Yeah. Thumb. Cool. I'm gonna put the POV away. I'm just gonna go off of my actual hand. We'll see how far we get. But I'll be honest, despite all the bugs, and to go back to Scarlet and Violet for a second, despite all the issues, I should still transform this the other way. Yeah. Stay on screen, buddy. Cool. Okay. Despite all that, like, the actual level design of the world, so far, I mean, I'm not too far in. Heck, I'm not even to the academy yet. But so far, it's been very fun. I've been able to just wander off and explore and find things. The random Pokemon, seeing them just wander about is really charming. And they've actually got them spawning in ways that still look like spawning in, but they're a little more natural, a little more fun. There's like clusters and more rare ones. I don't know. I've been genuinely enjoying just wandering the world catching Pokemon. I'm probably over leveled now, but like whatever. I can nerf myself later if I need to. I mean, it does lack some of the quality of life features. Like, I like playing with the experience share. I don't have all the time in the world to train up all my Pokemon, and it's kind of nice that they stay in sync. But it would be nice if that was a menu option as opposed to just mandatory, you know? Like, I totally understand the complaint that the option to disable it was removed. That's annoying, and that's not new to this one. Fair, I think like Sword had that too. So around the same time that reaches its apex, and kind of arcs up a little bit. Slightly more length doing that than it was doing this. Not a ton more. And I gotta brace my hand the right way to make this believable. There we go. This is going to be roughly 2 of those combined, and it still isn't going to get close to the actual edge before smoothing out. Actually arcing slightly, very slightly up. More like that. Cool. Yeah, one confident line, a little better than a bunch of scratched out ones. Really, especially with proportions, because the little scratched out ones, it usually means you're zoomed up so close that you're missing out on the full view anyway. Not that the line quality itself matters that much for the proportions, but it's like a nice warning sign. Okay, let's see. And like, I don't know, I've been enjoying the characters so far. Scarlet and Violet has, or well, Scarlet specifically, has been charming. I can't lie, I have enjoyed it. That one hits about 2/3 the way there. Lose quite as much ground as that vertically gains. By the time we're under the knuckle, we're more like this. We'll get the wrinkles for that properly. Like a little bit of a straight down, and then the thumb coming out. Now, a couple things about the thumb is it has a little taper up until just before where this is actually intersecting with the edge. Then it kind of swaps that taper. But ultimately, it comes out quite a bit further than that does. I said I was doing all that praising of non-scratchy lines, and yet I fell right back into them scratchy lines. Okay, and by the time it gets here, we're back more wider like this. And now the catch with this, and I need to be on big picture for this. This hits around the same time that does. Okay. That means that this part actually continues some distance. Or possibly made that slightly too long, but that's okay. We're essentially arcing, well, up, but not enough up for that table edge drama. Because there's more down here. Actually tapers out pretty quickly. Okay. Let's see how this looks without these like loose guidelines in the way. Toss the table edge for now too. And yeah, I don't know, that does It looks, the thumb is too narrow, I believe. Part of the issue. But that is solvable. In fact, I think I know how I want to solve it. Just this whole doodad down a hair. Also helps align the wrist, because I noticed the wrist seemed too close to table edge when we were sketching, so if thumb width was an issue here, then that may have also been a contributing problem there. That works. Okay. Also, Scarlet and Violet, I will say, I can't vouch for it later in the game. I heard the outfits are much more limited than in the past few, which is disappointing. But they did give you a surprising amount of character customization in the initial screen, which I quite like. And as far as customization goes, you could just rename your Pokemon whatever you want now, which takes so much pressure off of actually catching them. Because I like to nickname most of the Pokemon I catch. I'm trying to get off of that, but it's because, like, if you don't do it then, it's really stinking hard to later. And so, like, I would spend so much time just being like, okay, quick, name for this one, name for this one. And now I can be like, okay, some of these I've immediately got, like, yes, I've got a name for you. And other ones I'm like, I'm gonna, we'll come back to you later if we do. Like, you may just end up in the box, but that's okay. I haven't played Arceus. I did play Go way back in the day. Both Let's Go Eevee and actual Pokemon Go back in 2018. And 16, of course, when it was big, but 18 again. And, like, I don't know, I think they've incorporated the mechanics pretty smoothly. I will say, I like the art style, but there is no denying that the graphics, at least on the Switch Lite, are bad enough that it's distracting. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad game. That's not enough for me to be like, oh, the game's terrible, and tank it. But I do think it's one of those things that we need to acknowledge is a valid criticism. The actual video quality is very poor, to the point that I found it distracting. Now, it doesn't mean that it fully stops me from getting immersed in the game all the time. Like, there's times where I can get into it, but there's usually stuff that then snaps me back out of it, and I'm like, oh. Like, cool, I guess. And I went with Sprigatito because it's stinking cute, at least in its initial form. I know its later form gets quirky, but also, like, I'm not gonna lie, the later form also seems like one that you could just, like, hang out with. The other ones don't. I mean, Quaxley could be fun. But the stinking Metal Gator would just be... I don't know. I know a lot of people find that one very charming. Even its initial evolution, I just don't find that cute. Like, it's not bad, but I would not consider it... I would not consider it cute. I mean, yes, generally cute, but it's not one that I'd be like, ooh, cute, I want it. No. The other two were both tempting in that regard. But stinking... I almost called it Embor. I can't for the life of me remember it. It's a clever design and a cute concept. I just don't like how even the first one looks that much, and I really, really don't like the evolutions for that one. I mean, I'll be honest. I feel like the third tier evolutions for this gen are some of the weaker ones. And honestly, that all started around the same time they started trying to make these starters. Wow, that's a heck of a sentence. Started trying to make the starters like representative of various cultural things from the region they were based on. That's when this design started to get more out there. And don't get me wrong, you need an inspiration and new ideas. It's a good way to theme the regions. They're very cute. I mean, I love Inteleon. Thinking James Bond sniper looking, it's funny. But, like, I don't know. It's... Part of the problem is that it leads them to those humanoid designs because they're like, oh, cultural representation. The culture is made up of people. So, like, they're like, oh, we need a drummer or a spy or, like, a jester. It's not actually a jester. Kind of, but all those end up looking like people. And so I think that's part of the reason we've got this influx of Peoplemon. Well, now this is tough, because normally I'd want to say don't fall into the pitfall of drawing the thumbnail directly facing us. And we still aren't, but dagnabbit, it's pretty close. We need, like, longer grown out nails on this one. We'll make them. We're gonna make this real heckin' scraggly later. Don't y'all worry. This is way too much detail for this phase, but, you know, it's kind of fun. Right, I'm going to try to get some lines in here. I'm also going to try to not dox my thumbprint. I'm sure I couldn't with the level of detail we're doing, but I'm going to be careful anyway, because the internet is full of very clever people. Let's figure out where the knuckles need to go. Unfortunately, my hand position has shifted a little bit, so as a reference, it's going to be a little tricky for me to keep some stuff consistent. And that's just kind of the nature of drawing from actual reference. One here. This one ends up arcing out a little more and then back down. Whoops. There we go. Big one that accounts for most of this space, and then we got the one that actually merges down there. That was not the erase. There we go. Is that all connected? Okay, no, it's just a really funky one, huh? Let's see. Where shadows go? There's definitely like one in here. We should really figure out shadows at a later time, especially because I know we're going to be adding more detail to a lot of this. But it does help me make sure that I've got my positioning right. It's an easy double check, so. This is probably going to appear too muscled. So for context, this character is actually a specific character. At least it's most likely of one type, which is one that I'm going to be trying to actually replicate in here. And that is a specific sort of wandering noble whose ghost we encounter a lot around Castle Saul. Most likely more than one of them, not the same one's ghost chilling in different places. Be an odd choice for that ghost to follow. I mean, I guess most of the other ghosts of Castle Saul can follow us. No, they have no objections to it. So maybe it wouldn't be that weird. I mean, heck, there's that one where if you try to snipe it, it'll follow you straight to the balcony you're on. Which is a bad time, by the way. See, this one's got more of a rough edge, but we're gonna... Hey, come on. Yeah, I'm getting weird lag spikes on some of this. This is bad representation of it, but that's okay. And then there's the old... You get a little more detail down here too. That'll help make it more realistic. There we go. Now we can get rid of some of these straight lines. Problem is how easy it is to accidentally add, or accidentally shift my pose. In this section especially, that matters a lot because of the rotation of the arm. But there we go. Not the most pleasant hand, but I'd say a fairly decent representation of one. And not in any crazy amount of time or with a crazy number of redos. Like, look, I'll be honest. I know no one likes drawing hands, but it's mostly because they're hard to simplify and cartoon. Like, when it comes to actually, like, drawing them as, like, naturalistic drawing, they're not harder than anything else. I think they're actually easier than some of the other options. Mainly because they have a lot of easy reference points for proportions, which does make it obvious if you mess them up, but it also means you've got a lot of easy stuff to say, okay, I can tell exactly how far that ought to be from that. This knuckle to that knuckle compared to the other ones. I've got some fingers are similar lengths, so you can compare them to each other. It's, in my mind, it's easier than some stuff, like even like torsos, because the torso, it's easy to get it enough off to be wrong, but like not enough off for it to be obvious what's wrong, because there's not other reference points unless you've got an interesting pose or good background elements or other things. Like, naturalistic hands I don't think are bad. Now cartoony hands are stinking hard because most of them end up looking really childish or bad. Even like nice ones in cartoons, if you pay attention, they start to look bad a lot of the time. And they, you know, oftentimes you see them cartoon out an extra finger in the style, just because it's really hard to make it look decent. It's too high a level of detail for most things. So having fewer fingers, like usually mixing the middle finger and the ring finger, really does make it easier to. You can show most of the same poses, but you don't have to actually deal with as many little tiny detaily bits, because it means you can make all the fingers a little bigger and thus easier to see in cartoon. But a lot of ways to cartoon hands end up looking super childish, and it's also because there's a lot more detail in the wrist than we usually let on, and the thumb ends up looking really weird if you're not careful with it. Well, you know, that is at least reasonably proportioned-ish, although it's also easy to get the proportions on hands wrong. Your hand is long. I think a lot of people draw hands either like cartoonishly large because they're trying to get all the detail in there and it ends up just expanding, or way too small because they're like, oh, it's just a hand, and a lot of the times our mental image of the hand is really like the palm when we're thinking about the size of it. If you let your hand rest, your fingers curl up a little bit, for most people anyway. And obviously, if you've got a fist or anything smaller, or if you're writing, it's curled up, which is a lot of the ways we encounter our hands. Like, you don't splay your hand out flat all that often and see its full length. And it's interesting. I've certainly come to realize it wasn't. I forget. I need to double check where, because it was the first like actual like human proportions guide I found that. Enviato.tuts. I don't know anything about them or the quality of what they do, but I can vouch that their like how to draw people tutorial stinking great. It was the first one I followed where I was able to finally be like, oh, okay, this is where I need to focus first to get the proportions right, and then I know what to look for as key points where I don't have to memorize all anatomy at once, because you can deal with that later when you want to get that level of detail, but you need initial reference points that aren't that specific in order to like get some basic stuff going. Yeah, Enviato.tuts. They had some great ones. Sorry. Like I said, I'm both winded and actual sleepy, tired. So Yeah. But they were great. And they were the ones where I first realized, like, I thought the hands in that they were doing like cartoonishly large ones as placeholders until they were like, no, this is the actual length of the hand. And they're big. Hands are big. Okay. Now, we've got this nice hand rough here, which is fine. Like, I think if we wanted this to just look like a normal hand gripping it, it actually looks pretty good. However, two things. One, I do actually potentially, depending on the outfit, want to add a little bit of sleeve, because a little bit of sleeve is always fun. Lets us get some fabric in that's not too... Okay, admittedly, getting like down into the sleeve and the crease of the elbow, sleeves are stinking complicated to draw. Tubes of fabric are complicated to draw. However, the cuff is usually considerably less so, and is actually just fun. Let's pull up an image of these lovely nobles from Elden Ring, the aristocrats. Now, the one you probably remember are either these two, because you see them everywhere. You've got the torchbearers and the workers, or wanderers. These guys are, well, okay, no, that one's actually got the sword, so it's the hostile one. Frequently, they're non-hostile. You probably remember this one because it shoots blue magic and it's noticeable. Everyone forgets about this guy, or at least I do. Because, yeah, he can blow the horn, but, like, it's so rare they get the opportunity to. The banner's lovely, but they're rarer than a lot of the others. You don't see them just chilling around. Like, you can find these guys and these guys wandering around in all sorts of groups around Limgrave. These guys are in more specific spots. Granted, I think one of them turns into a heckin' rune bear, which is a problem. I still think rune bears are one of the hardest things to fight in that game. I am never happy to see one. Ever. Mainly, the two reasons I dislike the rune bears so much is one, they're one of the few critters that can like straight up outpace you. I think even on torrent, unless you get like a straightaway and you have good sprint, like they will catch up to you with almost anything you do. They've got that lunge that is way far reaching. Even the wolves you can run past most of the time. Rune bears will get you. At two, obviously they do a lot of damage, but the thing is, it's not just that they're fast; they'll follow you a long way. At least the ones I've encountered will. Like, they're an interesting fight, and they're definitely one you can learn and get better at. But I remember, especially early game, I was stinking terrified of those. And one of the first areas you encounter them, there's like 5 of them wandering around. And sure, they don't all aggro, but like, it's stinking scary. And one of these stinking guys is Ghost, leads you right into the middle of them, very unhelpfully. Okay, anyway, the reason I was focusing on this guy is this is actually the kind that we find at Castle Saul. In case you're wondering, the most distinctive part is probably they have the horn and the hat, but they're bent down in such a way that usually the hat's kind of hard to see unless you're looking for it. The horn is really obvious, but the rest of it does match. They are the same guys. I don't think they have the standards. You can see they've got the battle standards actually hung up all stinking around Castle Saul. No need to carry them when you got them flapping in the wind and everyone's dead. But there's 2 things specifically about these guys that I want to focus on. One, I'd like to do some more sleeve, but 2, these hands are really gaunt. Like, these are, I mean, they're, you know, they're not hollow, but they're hollow, you know? So I want to really lean into a lot of that. Lean into the slightly more gaunt, much more distinctly raised tendons, and really go for that for these hands. So that's what we'll do. We'll take this one that we've drawn and we will try to transform it into something that fits that better. But we will do that after the break. Like I said, I don't know if we'll go full time. Honestly, despite my tiredness, we probably will, unless this hits some nasty roadblocks, which I don't really anticipate. We've got good references. I think this will go fine. I mean, this hand, I'm pretty happy with how the hand turned out. So we will come back after the break. We will make this hand look older and more undeady, and we will go from there. So I'll see y'all in just a couple minutes. Howdys and salutations, y'all! We are back. Thank y'all for waiting. I apologize for slightly longer than average break. I had perchance forgotten to eat dinner. Or rather, I thought I could maybe eat it while I talked, and I do not have that level of multitasking in my heart today. My heart and my brain. I don't think I have that level of braining in my brain today. Because my brain's really fighting me. Oh well. Let's see. Gonna make this hand more gaunt. Now since we got just one reference image that we're using, I think... Have we got any better enemies? Better images of this particular enemy? Aha, yes! Let's check out our desktop, actually. Old Aristocrat. Not a lot to go off of, but it's enough. And that, for the record, before anyone asks, that is a satchel that's just draped down behind. It looks kind of bad at front view pictures, but it's not. Fun fact, you can summon these dudes as part of the Wandering Noble Spirit Ashes. I mean, maybe don't. They're a wonderful ragtag group, but I don't know that they're that effective at doing much of anything. I don't know. For every Spirit Ash that people say is terrible, there's someone who says that, like, oh yeah, with my playstyle, they're great. So maybe you'll find just the perfect synergy for you. I can't vouch that that'll happen. But, you know, it might. Or you can do what everyone does and just make your own synergy by using Mimic Tier, which is just a stinking wonderful summon. I have no objections that they nerfed it, although I hope they didn't nerf the boss too, because the boss is legitimately very fun. Although I made a little whoopsie. I already had my favorite spirit summons up to that point, which were the skeleton dudes, because no matter how many times they die, they can respawn as long as the boss doesn't double tap. And early game, most of the bosses don't think to do that. Godric being a notable exception with his AoEs. Oops. Granted, I came back to Godric over-leveled and beat him on my second try, but even so. Even then, my Spirit Ashes didn't survive very well, so maybe someone else for Godric. But most of them, most of the early game stuff, having the Skellies is great. Pardon. However, I summoned them for the Mimic Tier boss because I thought the Mimic Tier would summon Skelly buddies as well, and then we would have a big ol' Skelly crazy melee. But turns out the Mimic Tier did not do that, and so my skeletons just kind of punched it to death, and I was sad. Sad times. I do love all the... It is one of my favorite boss fights for two things. One of them is it always has funny comments. Usually self-disparaging ones. Because it's the only time where weak enemy ahead has, like, reactions that are despair or contemplate or contemplative. They're like, weak enemy, huh? Because it's you, and if it's weak, then that doesn't reflect well. But the other thing that's fun is the stinking bloodstains. Because watching people lose to their own builds, and I'm not immune to this, I mean, stinking the second Mimic Tier killed me once. Granted, I was, like, out of flask by the time I got there, but even so, I shouldn't have walked into my own stinking halberd. I know its moves like the back of my hand. I've used the same weapon the whole game, with the same stinking Spirit Ash, or Ash of War the whole game. I knew what it did and where it went and everything it could do. Why did I get hit so many times? It was embarrassing. But that's the way of things, you know. But it's really fun watching people's own builds. Like, my favorite one... Okay, well, two of my favorite ones that I saw just when I was wandering around there was one of them, obviously, Madness builds tend to blow themselves up as they fight the tier, because it's self-inflicting and Madness from anyone does it. So a lot of people who were, I assume, accustomed to the normal Madness that they would summon didn't fare so well when the Mimic was also summoning it and Madness themselves to death, which... I mean, come on. I'd do it too. When the mechanics do a little flipsy on you, it's tough. However, my favorite one is when they have like ultra great swords, because ultra great swords have two distinct features. One, they can stun most enemies they hit, especially if you manage to get 2 hits. And 2, when you do a power stance or like various stronger moves with them, they're very hard to break the stance of, which is a bad combo because a lot of people were used to being able to stun their enemies, and then the Mimic tier would do one of those moves that's stinking nigh impossible to stun out of, and just absolutely wreck them. I saw one guy who swung it back and forth like 3 times before getting catapulted into the air, because the Mimic tier had done like that low sweep attack. Oh, it was great. I feel bad for that guy, and again, just because you know your moves, it's not always easy to counter yourself. The thing that got me is the halberd is really good at roll catching because it has just that little extra bit of range, but it's faster than a lot of ultra great swords, and it comes out at a different angle. So a lot of the times, especially with NPCs that like to roll a lot, halberd, great, love it. They could roll 3 times and I still stab them at the end of it. However, when your primary means of defense is rolling because you're out of flasks, oops, I got roll caught by my own Mimic tier like 3 times. It was terrible. It was very funny terrible, but it was very bad. It was not a good showing on my part. Let's see. So I'm going to try to exaggerate lumps and edges here. If we want this to look scraggly, we really need to lean into it. Although their fingernails really don't look terrible. I won't go anything like horrible on the nail. We'll go just like normal. Kind of jagged. Not really supposed to be a major focal point. I can't check because my fingernails are short, but do fingernails refract what you see through them? Weird question, I know. Weird question, but is that a thing they do? Okay, new question. On the one hand, more wrinkles because looser skin. On the other hand, fewer wrinkles because no meat. Meat is the wrong word, and I immediately apologize for that. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna lean into more wrinkles right now. Although those look like stinking gills, so maybe let's take it down a notch. It looks like a lot of stuff is more taut. Okay, we'll have to think about that. Second thing is sleeve. We can... Sleeve is fun. Let's see, and if you're gripping the edge of that, your sleeve is going to... Aha! In my favor for a more dramatic pose. Excellent, what I wanted. I like these big cuffs. And this part can be nice and wrinkly. Because it's fabric, and that's wrinkly fabric is fun. Very dynamic. Of course, I need to think about how the wrinkle's gonna go. And when I overthink that, it usually ends up just being very bland and not dynamic, so I'm gonna have to be careful. I like the wrinkles on this. Like, the fabric's clearly like, hey, actually got quite a nice pattern on it. Ooh, I gotta make some. I want fabric like that. Oh, and that's a nice battle standard on this dude too. That's not anybody's battle standard. Who the heck does this guy work for? Dude, are these your like house colors? Because they're very nice. Anyway, this is a lovely pattern. But also the fabric itself has really, I don't remember if that's high or low drape, but it's clearly stiffer and kind of holds its own. So it's not going to be It'll actually be a nice contrast to Miquella's, which is clearly very flowy and floating. It's the difference between something being like nice like that and like more jarred and like wrinkling in on itself. Because it's just too stiff to flow nicely. That's not the best example, but you know. Like this, fairly graceful. Getting like chunks in it, less graceful. Like this is the big one you see a lot, where it like does, like sort of vanishes into its own fold. That means it's like comparatively stiff. Anyway, none of that is relevant to this. Well, they weren't terrible facsimiles, if I'm honest. Okay. But what it means is I need to assume that this is stiff fabric. At least somewhat stiff. You know what? I've got stinking fabric. Did I mention I sew in my free time? Free time. I do have free time, I just spend it on too many different things. Okay. Not the crushed velvet. That stuff is super nice and smooth and not at all wrinkly. But if I just throw this onto my arm, hold my arm in roughly this kind of position, and then let's just draw what it looks like. Unfortunately, this means I no longer have access to my eraser button, so I'm going to have to actually use the manual. Oh, well. Here, I'll even make like a little cuff type thing for reference. Nice. Back to pencil. Well, even that's not going to be the best cuff. No matter. We'll fix that part later. Edge kind of like in here. I'm just going to be fairly fast and loose with this, because I'm not trying to actually recreate what this fabric looks like on my hand one-to-one. It's probably not even the same type. Actually, what the heck is this? I think this is cotton. Let's see. So that kind of arcs in there, and then it kind of arcs over. Then there's like another one that does this. See, it vanishes into a big old fold over here. All the different funky interlocks of fabric. Nope, that wasn't right. Okay. We've got this. And it's gonna like come back up here, and then there's another big ol' bit there, but even it kind of like holds its form rather than playing nice. And out of this. That'll do. This, of course, ends up folding right back in on itself over to that little nook. This is what ultimately comes down here. This line I'm still sticking with, but knowing that it kind of like curves itself out. This, my friends, is why reference is so useful. Having a little bit of real fabric here has allowed us to do a very interesting, and I think actually fairly believable sleeve. Had we not had this reference, I don't think this would have turned out anything like this. I certainly wouldn't have drawn it this way. And it was quite quick. I'm gonna roll it up on itself a few times and make a sleeve, like a really nice puffy sleeve, and try to simulate how that piece is gonna look, sort of holding its own. I should have, actually this one's easier to use the eraser with, so I'm fine. I kind of like even having that one in there. Not so much. I do think, whoops, one of those was a line I definitely wanted to keep. But this, the way it flattens, is not, that would be, well, once again, it has to do with that drape and with the smoothness. Because if you've got, I don't know, you've got your arm, and it's here. If you have a nice soft fabric, it's just going to follow that, and soft isn't the right word, but a very drapey fabric, it's going to follow that nicely. It'll like get a little bit of tension here, but it'll, do that and like kind of fold over on itself. That'd be the dot dot on the other side. However, same arm. Well, this is apparently a slightly narrower arm, but what have you. There we go. Same arm. With a drapier fabric, it's going to fight that. It's going to have enough tension in itself that it's not really going to care what you think it ought to do and where your arm is. And it's just going to it'll sit on here and it'll follow the curve somewhat, but it's also going to sort of stick out and do its own thing. Which once again, makes sense and is something I knew, but I'd forgotten it until I looked at reference again. And I was like, oh, duh, of course. Oops, that's not the eraser. Because I let go of the eraser. Because I was looking at my arm reference while erasing. Probably not the right time for it. Okay, now let's try to make this fit into something interesting. Oops, I can probably get rid of this line too. Just loosely following it again, and I'm using way too dark of lines for this. Like, this will not need to be this prominent. Although it is fairly close in frame, so the level of detail is not a bad thing to have. Okay. And for this part, it's, just kind of doing its own thing. It goes where it wants to go. I get some wrinkles and such down here, but not a whole lot. So broadly curved. But generally speaking, it don't care. Not the smoothest merge over here, I won't deny. This is hard because there's a lot of shadow, and we try to do it without the context of everything else around it, and just doing one of them. That's kind of what that ends up looking like. Of course, if there was other fabric tucked into it, it would not look that way nearly so much. Let's try to clear this sort of connection of the worlds. Try to clear it up a little bit. Give a wrinkle in there, really lean into it. Keeping that one. I'm gonna have a little bit in there, but even then, I don't want much. There we go, just a little bit on that piece. Cool. And now if we even hide the underlayer, Well, that certainly looks scraggly, but it also looks like a sleeve. We can, of course, add patterns and detail later if we so desire. I might... I may consider some of that, but let's not get too off track for now. We still got the hand. Ah, who am I kidding? But I am going to make it on its own layer. Let's see. Just in case. Mostly so I can make it more faint so it doesn't over-dominate anything. Gotta kind of follow these same contours. And up with the edge. That one's too close, though. There we go. That's on the other layer. Got it. And then they've got a sort of vertical stripey pattern. So once again, we want these vertical stripes to match the implied creases that are in here. So we'll have to sort of think about what those creases are going to do to them. There we go. A little jarring having it right on that edge, so I'll try to get at least a tiny smidge of that other one. And then it looks like we've got a nice sort of like vine pattern going in here. Let's start on the one that's obvious. I'm not going to worry too much about the direction of the vine's curve, as long as we're consistent with it. Okay. Get warped up a little bit, and then this is going to get kind of compressed because it goes down on that other side. I can still come over here to where it's fairly visible. It's fine. This needs to compress more in a downward direction. That's what I'm going to do. There we go. Now it looks like it's actually just going over that fold or that crease a little bit, rather than being fully like just crunched up a little bit. I note that these seem to have some prominent spines coming out of them, and maybe even like a little counter curve in here. That's fine. And none of this is detail that I want to be super focal. I'm going to make it where they point towards each other. That's kind of a popular thing. I wonder... I feel like my enjoyment of topographical maps has affected how much I enjoy patterns on fabric, because the way you think about it is very similar. If you have a topographical map, you've got lines that show the different heights between... Like, it divides everything into flat layers of set height. So it'd be like if you had to make a mountain by cutting up layers of cardboard and just stacking them on each other, it'd be hard to make a smooth mountain unless you started doing like angled edges and stuff. So you're just like, okay, the bottom part is shaped like this, and then we've got like the next layer up is shaped more like this. It's really steep on this side, so the line's super close together, and it's pretty flat over here, so we got a bit of coast or whatever. There's like a little spike up here, but then the rest of the mountain is like more over here. Once again, this side is super steep, so they're close together. Starting to get some like separate peaks and stuff going. Super steep, and then even like super steep still. This part in particular might be. And the way, because the thing is, rivers go along these in much the same way that like it's like following the crease in the fabric. The way the river follows the mountain and ends up carving it and making a deeper crease. But like oftentimes you'd see a river and it would come through, well, actually it would probably be in much steeper points. But usually, because it eats into the mountain, you end up with like points towards where the river is. rather than just a smooth edge. Oops, I did not mean to remove that entire layer. And then even this would probably be a smoother, like the mouth of the river. And so you'd see, like maybe the river came down like this. Oh, probably wouldn't make that last part. And this part would be a little weird, but it would come through there. And so you can see the direction that the river is flowing. Maybe it even came from up there or something. Tributary coming in. I don't know. Kind of smooths out on this flat area and can be a whole big thing. But the point is, the way you think about the relationship between these river lines and the folds on them is very similar to the way that you think about these. Because if we have our fabric and it does this, then you've essentially got like your little river line in here. And so patterns, any pattern that crosses over this line has to bend in the same way. So much like we've got, like on your topo map, we've got one that goes in, and then one that goes in, and then one that goes in. If you've got... This last one's bad. And this is like rudimentary geology. I'm sure that actual geology is far more complex than this, and stuff overlaps and anything. But like, it would be really weird to see a river go like through this one, and then just flat plain, and then this one. Like, there's no riverbed. The river would just scatter across this whole layer, and it'd be like a nice waterfall or something. But most likely it just wouldn't work. Like any line that so if you've got the river here, any line that intersects it has to sort of mirror the stuff on either side in order for it to make sense. And the fabric's the same way. If we have a pattern that crosses this, it has to bend the same way, or else it doesn't make sense. If I was like, oh, we've got our little house pattern, doop, 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 that looks like it's floating over the fabric. If you have like a little square, then it needs to actually like match this. And then you can have your little house, and the point has to go towards, in fact, the point even needs to curve down more because it follows this curvature. So, and this is sort of the second part of this, is that most shapes can be thought of as fitting inside of a square. So if you can figure out how to get the edges of the square to line up, like this one, then you can figure out how to make a triangle work, because the triangle has to be like, okay, it needs to cross at the center point up here. And so you've got line coming down, and then center point and line coming down. And so now, even if you don't need the square, the square, you can draw a triangle that believably follows this contour. And I don't know, with practice that becomes much more naturally. I've obviously still got work I need to do because some of this doesn't quite work well. I'm actually going to smooth that one out, especially when you're talking about stuff that tapers, like triangles or these curves that are tapering. It gets more complicated figuring out exactly how it needs to taper. I'm going to take the cheap road and just not draw too much of that one. Oh, but this one though, okay. I may get rid of that crease because I think we're showing enough crinkle with this, and then it needs to really like make this. We're going to curve down more than that. I do want to add a little more volume. Well, actually, this can be fairly flat. We've got like a nice bump for the wrist in here and a very jagged one there that we've just been kind of working with. I probably don't need all these topographical maps in here. I get on slight tangent. That's even from the previous layer. Slight tangent, my bad. But if you like topo maps, fabric works exactly the same way. And if you like fabric, topo maps work the same way, and they're very fun. I really like topo maps, I think, is the lesson to come out of this. I don't know if that's a helpful analogy for anyone, because I don't know if there's like a ton of people who like drawing, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who like drawing in topographical maps, but like it may be a smaller group than the number of people who just like drawing in general. And if your example is less common than the thing you're trying to teach, it's probably not a good example. Unfortunately. Oop, it's been a while since I saved. Let's do that. Okay. Now we've got a sleeve. It's looking a little flat, but that's okay because it actually leans into the gauntness of the wrist. Of the gauntlet. No. Now what we really need to do here is to really pick out the tendons. And that anything that is mostly like flesh, we'll try to lessen a little bit, and anything that's supported by tendon, we're going to make more extreme. So, just for context on where these tendons go, center point of the wrist. Probably have 3 coming out of there. I'm just going to try to get lines of roughly where they're going first. And then we'll work on making sure that everything looks exactly right. Obviously, the biggest one is going to come up here. And actually, they're fairly straight lines up until they go over the knuckle. This one's going like that. And the pinky tendon is rarely, well, at least I'm having trouble seeing it on my hand. I'm sure it goes to a similar place, but it seems to connect like further out even. We'll lean into that. We can still have wrist here. Anything that's angular, let's really lean into the angle. And when I say lean into the angle, I realize that's like when a professor says, like, dig deeper when you're writing this, or like, this section's awkward. Like, it's not helpful. When I mean leaning into the angle, I mean, you can have a really soft angle like this, or wait, we can make it a little clearer. Okay, soft angle. I would call this like a neutral angle. If we're leaning into it, like, the soft one is basically convex. You can see that if you had this line, you divide it into 2 lines. With the normal angle, they're just flat. With the soft angle, both lines are roughly curved outwards. If you want to lean into it more, what you need to do is curve those lines inwards. And it really accentuates it. Now, we don't want to go too crazy with it, but you can see, like, that's what I've done to get a slightly more cartoony, but also more jagged looking here, is by leaning into making these angles sharper. And it doesn't have to be the full angle. Like, you can see this one's still round here, but the lines that come away from it are ultimately, like, pushed in. And it helps make it more jagged. This one's probably a little too jagged. Because it's still a bone under there, so there's at least, like, the little bit of, like, roundedness that comes with that. I think ultimately this pinky tendon might, well, we'll see. We'll see how far we end up raising these. But I kind of don't hate that line. I mean, you can see that these guys are almost comically exaggerated in their tendons. So we may just have like one group lump at this part. And then we're going to make really raised tendon. And then we're going to have to use shadows and be clever about making it look like there's pretty deep crevices between these. But even just having them visible will already be like a warning or an automatic signal that, like, oh, something is up. Because either it's a very tense grip or something ain't right. And of course the hand, or the thumb rather, has another one that comes out more like this. Ultimately, get a lump like that, which means that anything not part of that I'm going to try to make more jagged by comparison, and then we'll just sort of see how the rest of this fits together. Really lean into my angles for anything else that I can here. This is still like skin, so I don't, if you lean in, like leaning into the angles there is how we get that fin look, so I really need to make it look just like there's less, no, maybe the opposite. Maybe we need more wrinkles. We have this, we could have like more folds. Maybe the trick is we need to make these folds seem tighter. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure tighter folds is really the issue here. Other than this needs to be just like kind of a, here, that'll lean fairly well into that. And then we've got kind of like a crevasse in here. Even this one, that's just supposed to be the edge of the crevasse, really. And the silhouette is looking fairly good, except for this section here. Let's really try to lean into this. But mostly by just like losing a lot of the roundedness on it. Make it more gaunt. Oh, okay. I think I know at least one approach to this. Is let's think about where the bones are and try to sort of... I mean, this is what you should do anyway for a lot of this, but quote-unquote hang the muscles and skin off of those. Like, treat the skin as a fabric and the bones as points. So if you have these 3 points and you've got like a nice bit of fabric that falls onto them, ultimately you're going to end up with like something like this, which is going to get you those more jagged edges, whereas if the skin has more tension, then it'll probably be a smoother edge. So let's treat it like that. Let's think about where the bones in the hand are, which admittedly I don't have a lot of practice with that information. It's been a while since I've seen a chemistry lab skeleton, you know. And the tendons are also going to be points for that. Could also probably stand to look at my reference a little more. I mean, we've got this reference here. And I could also look up just like older hands. Step 1 is let's not make this separate. This is just a convergence. Where are the main points as far as that's concerned? This part's not quite working. Oops. Oh, I'm still on the sleeve details, aren't I? Dagnabbit. Ah, well. That is something we can fix, and I may fix at the end, but it's not a priority right now. It's like just the thumb, right? And part of the sleeve, dang it. Actually, it's fine that the sleeve's in there. Let's see, we're almost to the point where we can hide the rough hand. Gonna try to stay true to our table. I'm okay with doing all this on sleeve details. I'll just select it all and change the layer at the end. Let's see. Think about where these bones are. Still not really looking younger. I'm gonna put away rough hand. See if that... Okay, this one's pretty necessary for still seeing the shape of the hand. These curved inner bits are not doing us favors. We can continue. Whoops, that's the wrong pen. Maybe continue these down. How do I keep hitting P? Not what I'm trying to hit, but no matter. There. I think we're getting too much in curve for this bit. Well, that also looks stinking incorrect as all get out. Possibly I have this joint in the wrong place. Possibly I do actually need to imply that the tendon is more like that. I could always look up other hand references. There we go. We can at least have our reference, if not in the same pose, in a usefully similar one. Oh, okay. I think that may be part of. We're still gonna have to deal with these, but let's clear out some of this. Definitely that one, and let's have another go at this. Looking once again at our reference, even though this is a game reference. We've got the thumb, and we've got everything happening here. There is sort of a connection between it, a higher up connection in the actual tendon, and then you can see that we've got like this shadowed gap. And then most of the rest of these are going to be just defined by sections of shadow, which is what we were trying to do, but I was doing it kind of badly. We've got our shadowy section here. Then this one, once again, got the bright of the tendon. Should still aim towards a more jaggedy look if we're really going to lean into this. Got another section of shadow, but each of these shadow sections are getting smaller as they're more obscured by the tendons around them. And there's like shadow over here. Makes this more of an in-lean. This, I mean, on the one hand, we need some of these wrinkles. On the other hand, we don't need it to look as fleshy, for lack of a better word, so we can like try to lean out of some of these. Getting too scratchy, but at a detailed view, that does look not bad. Thumb still looks better than the rest of it. And I'm quite happy with the sleeve. We can do this. All right, no, this is the actual, just the negative space dark gap. Try to narrow this one a little bit. The dark and the light and so on, all vanishing into here. And there we go. Extra jank for that. We can add some detail bits to the thumb here. We add some of that to some of these. And we can make the tendons really pop on these too. There we go. Now I'm gonna mess with this section a little more here. Zoop. Sorry for going quiet there. I was just sort of like skimming along the image, trying to find any loose odds and ends that I ought to try to clean up. Oops, besides this one, I mean. Me and my diagrams. Gotta love them diagrams. Okay. Well, thankfully that's actually pretty separate. And we'll just merge these layers. And now sleeve details is actually just the sleeve details, and rougher hand is everything for the rougher hand and the sleeve itself. Which I suppose we could try to do some details on, but I'm not going to get crazy with it because there's already a kind of a lot happening in this section. I may just do some vague swirls. Why did I do this? Why would I make this multi-layer? We can at least desync those a little bit, make it clear that there's something up with that. I mean, to match the second line to it is so much harder. In any case, I'd want this spiral to go the other way. It's so hard to make spirals that actually look like they're going opposite directions. I don't know why. I always psych myself out and think I'm going the wrong way and then undo, and then I'm like, no, wait, that was the correct way. There's a fair bit of space in that crease, so we can actually give like a lot of visual leeway with it. Let's see. That is one thing when remembering when you're crossing the same fold repeatedly. Make sure that you're sidestepping in the same direction. So this little offset, so when we cross a fold and you've got a line going through it, like oftentimes you've got an offset to show like, oh, okay, there's like a little bit of fabric that's missing in the view. This is a pretty extreme offset. But do remember that if you have a line that crosses it in more than one place, make sure that that offset is in the same direction. So if we were following here, then it needs to return on this side to look believable, because we know that this section of the fabric is folded a little bit lower compared to this section. Now, if you've got really stretchy fabric and you want to show that, then you can do it in other ways. But oftentimes we just sort of are naturally following the flow of the lines, and you're like, oh, okay, we'll just offset it this way. And now it looks like this section is, actually it does still look folded, but it doesn't look like it's folded with one bit like over it, like this, with one side down and one side up. Instead, it looks like it's more folded like underneath, like that. And if that's what you're going for, that's fine. And this has a little bit of that, but I think we mostly want this to not look like there's too much change going on at all. So either way kind of works, at least in this scenario. But if you're trying to actually do a side-to-side offset, do be aware of what you're doing with that. You gotta stop drawing with the edge of the pencil. I designed it specifically to notice when I draw with the edge of the pencil, and so now I need to not make that a pitfall. Now for crossing over different creases like this one, then you can definitely just like shift it whichever way you want. Knock yourself out. Getting just the edge of a crease with that one, so we're not quite, nothing quite happening there yet. I think this needs like one more swirl to really be believable. And it needs to go counter to all of these. At least in my mind it does. That probably ought to be a bigger one, but that one's okay. Anyway, once again, I've drawn extra diagrams. Let's put those away for the night. And much like those, I think we're probably going to put the stream away from the night. I know we're a little bit early, but we've kind of finished one section, at least to a reasonably satisfactory degree. I'm going to go ahead and re-flip the layers. Now we've only got the two of them that need re-flipping. Wonder if I can do both of these at once, and it won't crash, maybe. Where'd they go? Where'd they go? Oh, they're just super faint. And it's super faint. I can barely see. Okay. We're gonna have to move these layers a little bit. That is a thing we can do. Cool. Edit, transform, whoops. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. Okay, I'm just gonna blindly accept that one. Yeah, it wasn't even close. It's easier to move it at this stage. Okay, and so now if we line this up, put the hand in roughly the same spot as in the composition, quite a little bit less far, but that's okay. We can put away the rough hand. The super rough hand anyway. And yeah, we put the composition lines back. We have a hand. Now granted, it looks like our hand has moved a fair way up. I may actually move it back down, just to line up. Because I know that during all of our transforms there, stuff got shifted around. Okay. Now we can put away POV, and we've got an actual one there. Slowly but surely, this is coming together. Man, you can tell that placeholder arm has such a different level of detail. That's okay. That's where we'll leave it for tonight. Thank y'all for dropping by. It's been an absolute blast. And I hope that y'all have a good one. See you on the flip side.